The left is making a, well, pathetic but also disgusting effort to throw Marjorie Taylor Greene off the ballot as an insurrectionist. And a judge, this is a left-wing judge, has allowed a case to go forward in which she had to testify, Marjorie did, and they tried to get her on all kinds of issues. In fact, the most amusing part of this conversation focused on the year 1776. In fact, the lawyer for the people suing Greene, they were like, "Isn't it true that you repeatedly used the phrase 1776, the year of the Declaration of Independence?" This is actually, if you think of the American Revolution, there were two American revolutions, the Revolution of 1776 and the Revolution of 1789. The first one was the actual revolution against the British. And Marjorie Taylor Greene, very coolly, with her sort of characteristic aplomb, she goes, "Well, actually, 1776 is on our Georgia state seal right here in this building." To which the other lawyer was like, he didn't really know what to say. But, this whole idea that 1776 is sort of a dangerous notion to conjure up, this is being also used, Julie Kelly made this point, by a number of the Biden DOJ attorneys and also by some of the Obama and Clinton judges, where they will fault defendants, January 6 defendants, on the basis that they invoked 1776. Here, for example, is Judge Harvey, quote, he says, he's talking about the January 6 protesters, quote, "They spoke of political violence, of the spirit of 1776, of revolution, of war." So suddenly invoking the American Revolution itself is taboo and is also considered to be somewhat dangerous. So back to this hearing for Marjorie Taylor Greene, the reason this has gone forward is it was pushed basically by leftists like Harvard professor Lawrence Tribe, and they're hoping to use an old law. It's called the Disqualification Clause of the 14th Amendment. It was written after the 39th Congress convened in December 1865. What happened was there were a number of Southern Democratic traitors. These are people who had fought for the Confederacy, people like Alexander Stephens, Democrat from Georgia, who was the vice president of the Confederacy. And these guys basically were back in Congress. And so the idea of passing this law was, listen, if you have taken up arms in a massive rebellion against the country, you should be disqualified from running for office. Now, it made sense in the Civil War context, but let's remember that this was a war in which more than 600,000 people died on both sides. This was a war in which the Confederacy broke with the Union and created its own country, its own government, its own currency, its own army. And so that is the definition of rebellion. That is what a real insurrection looks like. This is totally different from the people who went into the Capitol on January 6th. And let's remember, Marjorie Taylor Greene wasn't one of them. If she went into the Capitol, she had every right to be there. She's an elected congresswoman. The same tactic, by the way, was tried against Madison Cawthorn. It went to federal court, but the federal court dismissed the case. They realized that this was silly. They also realized that, how do you claim to be protecting democracy when you're actually subverting it? How do you claim to be saving democracy when you're trying to get elected people, elected leaders off the ticket so that their own constituents can't vote for them? If you think that these people are so disloyal, why don't you go make the case to Marjorie Taylor Greene's constituents and tell them, don't vote for an insurrectionist, she doesn't belong, and let them make the decision, not you. But no, the left realizes that's not going to work. So their strategy is to make these preemptive strikes using the legal system to try to achieve judicially a result that they could not achieve democratically. So this is the judge involved here is this Amy Totenberg, obviously another activist masquerading as a judge, because this is someone who should have known that, even if you're going to invoke the 14th Amendment, even if you're going to try to employ the disqualification clause, you have to pay attention to who is it that disqualifies a sitting congressman or congresswoman from running. Well, the answer is Congress. Congress has to take the action to do that. You can't just simply decide to have a judicial proceeding and some judge decides, well, I think that you made comments that sort of qualify as an insurrectionist, so you're off the ballot and your constituents don't get to make a decision about this anymore. This is what happens when you have judges who don't really believe in the rule of law. And I don't think it's going to work. Marjorie Taylor Greene is going to be fine. She handled herself with grace and aplomb. But the very idea that you have a proceeding in the first place is a national disgrace.